Hello and welcome to the programme of films made by members from Cheadle and Gatley Cine and Video Club. My name is Davies and I'm the immediate past chairman. The club is sited just southwest of Stockport, south of Manchester and about 2 miles from Manchester Airport. We currently have 36 members with an average attendance of just under 24. And we meet every Thursday night between September and April. We endeavour to incorporate a comprehensive programme of film viewing, technical evenings, members miscellany evenings, and of course we have our in-house competitions. We're fortunate to have with us 8 members who are ex-BBC employees. They've brought with them the skills of filmmaking, camera work, sound recording and general engineering. Most of our members now are retired and like most other clubs we're endeavouring to recruit new members. The first film you're going to see was made by one of our members, David Andrew, when he and his wife were on holiday in Alaska. The film is called Alas, Alaska.
The lesson is that you should do unto others as you would have others do unto you. It's that simple.
You should do unto otters, yes, otters, as you would have otters do unto you. The otter in question is the sea otter, a small, friendly-looking creature found only off the Pacific coast of North America. Who would think the ancestors of this playful creature would have such an important role in the making of what we know today as Alaska, a curiously Russian outpost of the United States of America. The sea otter's natural home is that vast ocean which separates the two nations, but which came so close to linking them. When, 250 years ago, the Russians began to hunt the sea otter for its luxurious pelt, they followed it eastwards until they reached the Alaskan coast. Imagine several thousand miles from home, and the Cossacks are trapped by greed in one of the most inhospitable areas of the world. No easy landing places, deathly cold waters, glaciers coming right down to the sea. A no man's land, except for the 20 native tribes of Indians and Eskimos. America to the south, still forming as a nation, had certainly given it little thought. For 100 years, the Russians persevered, making fortunes, capturing the little sea otter and selling its fur, the thickest of any mammal, to China. In return, they carried home shiploads of tea, the new must-have drink in Moscow. They colonized first the offshore islands, brutally forcing the native Aleutians to be their sea otter hunters. But word got out about the golden fleece on offer, and the Americans did finally come north to see for themselves. A Cold War threatened, but a deal was struck, and the Russian-American Company was formed at the start of the 19th century to sell even more sea otters to the Chinese. It was led by one Alexander Baranov, who set up HQ here on Kodiak Island. The Russians took the New Deal as a passport to spread further down the coast. But now they had to blast their way ashore, facing the wrath of the native tribes. If Alaska was anyone's, it was theirs, not these wild Russians from across the sea.
They destroyed the people, they destroyed people's culture. The society that was created here was based on slavery, indentured servitude.
Unfazed, they moved HQ south to Sitka, where the Russian-American Trading Company still exists today.
I think because the Russians were only here to extract wealth from the area, I think the assumption was once the wealth was gone, they would leave, they would depart. So I don't think that this was ever envisioned as a long colony, say in the sense that the British would have perceived India or South Africa. This was a short-term, ephemeral venture.
And so it was. The poor sea otter was hunted right down to Southern California and almost to extinction. The desperate Russians tried to hunt wildlife in the bleak hinterland, but found the wildlife better adapted than they were. By the mid-1860s, they were looking for a buyer for their colony, and found few takers apart from the newly confident United States. The price, $7 million, less than 2 cents an acre. But many Americans were dumbfounded. Why on earth pay anything for just a huge lump of ice? They ignored it for 30 years, until in 1898 they suddenly realized it might be worth more, much more than $7 million. And so a new invasion began of this unsullied land. They came north in their thousands, from Seattle, from California, from all along the western seaboard. Prospectors looking for their own golden fleece in the Klondike Gold Rush. They arrived here at Skagway with their life's belongings, and in their innocence they set off up 2 trails heading towards the wild Yukon just over the border in Canada. Skagway built a town to get them started. And it's still there today, preserved virtually in aspic. In the time of one generation, Alaska had gone from being Russia to being the Wild West. They even built a train up from the town to the White Pass and down to the Yukon. And that's still there today, for tourists to take a short trip back in time. For $90 or £60, the 3-hour journey up to the pass and back is enough to understand the hardships awaiting those early Klondike pioneers. Before the railway, these hopeful dreamers from the sunny south had to climb every step amid the snowy wastes. Up to 35 feet of snow falls up here in the winter. The railway was financed by British money, for while the Russians had spent 150 years colonizing the coast, the British had pioneered west through the virgin lands of Canada, setting up a series of trading posts. The train was to be their route to more wealth by providing for the newly rich prospectors. But was the train perhaps jumping the gun? Once over the pass, the adventurers came to a river and had to build boats to get them the remaining 250 miles to the goldfields at Dawson City. It is estimated that of 250,000 prospectors who sailed into Skagway, only a few thousand ever reached the goal, and very few of those were able to make the struggle worthwhile. Today, this historic route of tunnels and flimsy bridges, forged by equally tough men out of nothing, is among the 29 World Heritage construction sites, along with the Eiffel Tower and the Panama Canal. Unfortunately, the Klondike Gold Rush ended after only 2 years, before the railway was even finished. A better strike drew everybody elsewhere, to the west coast of Alaska itself. The train did make its money by serving the hinterland until the 1980s. And as today's tourists return from the 2,800-foot White Pass, twice as fast as they went up, the cemetery tells its story of this Alaskan venture. The Americans had finally noticed Alaska at least, and began some small modernization. The Second World War speeded further development for a string of Pacific naval bases. But Alaska was still only a colony or protectorate, and didn't become a full-blown state until 1959. Resentment at this slow recognition simmers on still, and signs of Alaskans' Russian past cling on everywhere. It might have been so different. The Russians would probably have given the British first option on Alaska, if the British hadn't been their enemy in the Crimea at the time.
The British had an interesting role in Alaska. If the British had had fewer distractions, I think they would have conquered this area. I think without a doubt they were the strongest nation. They had already a substantial history in colonization. They knew how to do it.
Even now, the US government uses Alaska to extract oil, minerals and salmon with comparatively little investment. The Russian Orthodox Church is strong everywhere. The sea otter has made a dramatic comeback off the coast. But alas for Alaska, it is still a land that nobody cares much about.
The second film we're going to see was made out of rushes prepared by our member who was an ex-BBC cameraman called Don Groom. He went to a sheepdog trial in Derbyshire, brought back the rushes and presented them to club members who could use them as they wished. They re-edited them, added sound and interpreted their own films. The film you're going to see is the one that we've selected for this programme. Is called Country Fair, made by Alan Coulter, who is an ex-BBC sound recordist.
Recently, whilst aimlessly driving through Derbyshire, I became aware of an unexpected increase in numbers and types of vehicles, and, wondering about the reason, I decided to follow this motoring throng. We soon arrived at a signpost which told me roughly where we were now heading, while a nearby temporary placard explained the reason for this heavier than expected traffic. Having nothing better to occupy my time, I decided to join my newfound friends and observe their brand of merrymaking. Some of the local inhabitants also showed interest in what might be taking place and discussed the matter in hushed tones, but not all was in entire agreement. It seemed that this was going to be a popular event, and the car park was filling up rapidly with old cars, new cars, and even older cars. Britons are known the world over for their love of animals, and it was heartwarming to see this being amply demonstrated here, with proud owners competing to show just how well they looked after their furry friends. Of course, last year's models were now out of favour, and while still invited, they were presented in a slightly different manner, being served hot on a plate. Food was an essential here, as most people were undernourished and required building up to face the rigours of the day. Pets also had to be distracted by treats in order to prevent them running amok and precipitating a mad panic amongst the live exhibits. I don't know how much truth there is in this, but I did hear it said that at an event such as this it was best to be either a horse or a human child, as neither tastes very nice, and are therefore left pretty much to their own devices, which, in the case of a human child, almost always seem to involve a degree of energetic violence one way or the other. It would appear that most men were expected to become somewhat inebriated, as the toilets were thoughtfully inclined to aid aiming miscalculations. The hand-washing facilities were also first class. I wasn't too impressed with the modern art section of the exhibition. There just seemed to be a lot of different sized wheels and belts going round and round endlessly without any result. But I was taken with the imagination of the creator of the mechanical dinosaur feeding from a trough. I was pleased to see that the cloakroom facilities were well used, and that the left luggage office had a strong police presence to deter wrongdoers. Over in a distant part of the site, preparations were being made for what I understood to be a competitive event, where the winner would be the dog that could catch and eat the most sheep in what appeared to be a set time of about 2 hours per contestant. This wasn't strictly very fair at all, because each dog had a bad-tempered whistling human helper, seemingly pretending to be a scarecrow, but secretly telling the dog what the sheep were going to do next, whilst the sheep didn't appear to have any help at all, other than the small fenced enclosures, which, if they entered, guaranteed their safety, at least until next year, that is, when they might be allowed to turn up again, this time maybe to be complimented on their taste.
They were all right last year, Bob, but it weren't there last year.
As always, there was one self-appointed individual trying to organise things to his own advantage.
But a lame, it's a long way, walk from that cross to that pen.
Yeah.
Because if you remember, you know when you stood at your post,
Yeah.
you had a job to see that drive gate.
But he was soon put down by the neutral observer hidden in a nearby hut,
I
never realised we got so many posers on the committee.
who very quickly came to regret his temerity.
In a straight line, dead straight line, is smack under that thorn bush. Just you sit on that chair.
Finally, the main event of the day commenced, and men and dogs were made fools of by sheep getting their own back, pretending not to understand what was required of them.
The third film you're going to see is a film made by two members, a husband and wife team, Richard and Sheila Thacker. It was made following their holiday in America. When they took the film, they planned to just show their holiday trip around America, but when they started editing the rushes, they clearly found a theme coming through.
When we eventually decided to cross the Atlantic for the first time, Boston seemed to be a natural starting point to explore New England and some neighbouring attractions, and to enthusiastically search for the true spirit of America.
Like all tourists, we are suckers for a good market. And in Quincy Market, we found the added interest of some very talented buskers.
Boston's rather special in American history. The old State House was where the Declaration of Independence was first read to the people. So where else could Old Ironsides be birthed?
But on with our search for the spirit of America. This is the fall, and so it is leaf peeping time. New England seemed to us to be very reminiscent of England's own green and pleasant land. There are, of course, lots of clapboard houses and churches in the area, since so much timber grows here. One of the things we most wanted to do was to try to seek out what was typically American, to get a flavour of what was peculiar to that great country, the spirit of America. Sometimes the colours of the foliage are almost beyond belief. The beauty is quite breathtaking. Could this be the spirit of America?
Up in Vermont, in the little country village of Woodstock, there seemed to be just a small central commercial area surrounded by trees. When they built the bridge, they built a roof over it to prevent the heavy winter snow from blocking the road.
We called in at the pumpkin farm to see scarecrows and corn dollies, and of course pumpkins. We unfortunately did not have time to sample the pumpkin pie.
It was impossible to pass by Joe Orton's country store without going inside. Was the spirit of America we were seeking to be found here? The inside of the store was a veritable Aladdin's cave. You name it, they'd got it for sale.
so that you can enjoy leaf peeping to the full. New England states operate fall foliage hotlines from mid-September. These tell you where and when the best views are to be seen. But you do have to be quick, because the best displays can sometimes last for as little as only 2 or 3 days.
Now we're down on the coast, in Maine. No, we've not been hunting, nor riding on a train from Bangor. Kennebunkport is a seaside resort typical of the area, very much tourist orientated. But it's the sort of resort which could almost be found anywhere. So we didn't find the spirit of America we were seeking here.
The first tree to bring colour is the red maple, followed by the sugar maple. Then the oaks, sumacs, dogwoods, birches, hickories, and finally beeches.
Here we are in Niagara. Surely we'll find the spirit of America here. A sail on Maid of the Mist is a must. Get suitably kitted out in plastic waterproofs, like a swarm of blue locusts. And then for our boat ride. Wow, that was a fantastically exhilarating experience, truly memorable. And so we asked ourselves, maybe this was the spirit of America. And now we've just time to pick up some postcards of the leaves of New England before heading south. And here, in contrast to the beauty of New England and its leaves, New York is everything you've seen in the movies. This is one busy city. Will we find the spirit of America here, we wonder? One of the most famous landmarks is the Empire State Building. And from the top, the panorama of the whole area is undoubtedly impressive. In Central Park, some energetic types whiz by, whilst others prefer a more leisurely pace. On the east side and the west side, in uptown and down, in the sounds and the smells of New York City, the sights assault you from all sides. This frenzied metropolis. So then, it's back to the hotel. We've just time for one last brief trip. So it's on to the Staten Island ferry, waving goodbye to the Manhattan skyline. And then into view comes the Statue of Liberty, given to the United States by the people of France in 1886. Although it's only 145 feet high, it's tremendously impressive. And immediately we feel that we have at last got a taste of the spirit of America.
And then, behind the statue, we see Ellis Island. Isle of Tears, Isle of Hope, where nearly 70 million would-be immigrants pass through the vast waiting rooms, dormitories, and medical examination rooms. For 100 million Americans, Ellis Island evokes memories of family members.
And so the realization dawned that the spirit of America is not in its buildings or in places, but it is the spirit expressed by its people. People from the early pioneers immortalized in Boston to the present-day crowds on a New York sidewalk. People here at the pumpkin farm and at Woodstock, and visiting the shops at the seaside. People in the blue queue at Niagara and in Joe Orton's country store. These people together form the true spirit of America. And in our search, we had seen them all, but at the time had not realized the truth.
The final film in the first half of the programme has been made by one of our members, Colin Robinson, who has combined his interest in steam engines and filmmaking by making a film of steam engines designed by William Arthur Stanier for the London and Midland service, and he's called it Jubilee Steam.
On a summer's day in 1934, a new class of engine, later christened the Jubilees, made their debut on the LMS. They became popular with enthusiasts and enginemen alike, and some were still in use when steam came to an end on Britain's railways over a generation later. The London, Midland and Scottish Railway Company had been formed with a grouping together of 7 independent railway companies on the 1st of January 1923. Between them, they provided services to the western half of England and Scotland. The LMS inherited a disparate collection of locomotives, many of which had been designed for specific routes. Drastic rationalisation was needed, and although many changes were made, it was not until the arrival of William Arthur Stanier as the new Chief Mechanical Engineer in 1932 that significant progress was achieved. At the age of 56, Stanier had been headhunted from a well-established career on the Great Western Railway, then at the forefront of steam engine development and a strong advocate of standardisation. He was given the task of introducing the new range of locomotives and, just as importantly, of bringing together the design teams from the major pre-grouping companies with their widely differing views on locomotive development. Under his leadership, the modern and efficient engines spread throughout the LMS system, and many were still in use when steam came to an end over 30 years later. King George V's 25 years as monarch brought celebrations throughout the nation in 1935, and the railway marked the occasion with the name conferred on one of Stanley's new engines. As a result, the class became known as the Jubilees, and altogether 191 of them were built. No fewer than 86 of them were named after the colonies and provinces that formed the British Empire, while the remainder were given names to commemorate great naval commanders and their battleships. Four members of the class have survived into today's preservation age. Cola has been restored and operates at the Tyseley Steam Museum in Birmingham. Leander was rescued from a scrapyard in Barry in South Wales and needed a very expensive overhaul before she could be used again. Galatea has not been so lucky. She was also rescued from the Barry scrapyard, but following a derailment there, parts of her driving wheels were cut off, so she will have to stay as a collection of parts until new ones have been manufactured. Bahamas was bought by an enthusiast society in Stockport who raised funds for her restoration, but with the end of steam on Britain's railways, all private locomotives were banned from using the main line, and Bahamas was confined to a steam preservation centre at Dinting near Glossop. The ban remained in force for over 3 years, but it was eased to allow some of the restored locomotives to venture out again. Bahamas was one of the engines selected, and she travelled far and wide to the delight of thousands of enthusiasts, both on board and at the trackside. Sadly though, the Dinting Centre was forced to close in 1990 when the rail connection was taken out. All of the locomotives, the workshop equipment, and the growing collection of memorabilia had to be moved. Eventually, most found a new home at Ingro on the preserved Keighley and Worth Valley Railway. Here, the former goods warehouse has been converted to become a museum and workshop where locomotives can be displayed and restored to active service. Bahamas was repainted in British Rail's green livery when she was used on the mainline excursions, but now the essential boiler insurance certificate has expired. Without it, she cannot be steamed. A major overhaul needs to be undertaken, but when it has been completed, she will live again the golden days of Jubilee steam.